Hey, what's up, everybody? What's up? Dr. Jaws here, and tonight we are doing a really exciting fossil special on sharks of the Jurassic period. This is going to be pretty cool because the Jurassic period was when sharks really started to come into their own in terms of the sharks that we're familiar with today. All eight of the modern shark orders, so squaliforms, let's see how I can do those. Hexangiforms, squaliforms, squatiniforms, prissiophoriforms, heterodontiforms, erectolobiforms, lamniforms, and carchariniforms. And then you also include enchironiforms. They all emerged during this period in the middle of the Mesozoic era. So it's going to be really cool to learn more about Jurassic shark history and see the biodiversity of this period, as well as just kind of have a recap of shark evolution in general. And we have some cool simulations of fossil sharks, prehistoric sharks, so we'll kind of take a look at those. And with that, I think we'll just go ahead and get started. I'm going to save this for when more people hop on, but this is Asteracanthus. Is a not recently discovered, but there was a beautiful skeleton of this species discovered that we'll kind of take a deeper look into as we continue through the night. But this is a Jurassic shark from, let's see where this is from actually. Germany. There we go. Germany is where this species was discovered. But we'll get more into that later. I think what we should do first is start with kind of like an overview of shark evolution. A lot of great resources around the web as far as mapping out how sharks evolved. So I think what we could probably start with is I think we could recap where we were with a little bit of the fossilguide.com timeline. So this is a really great resource, fantastic website talking about all kinds of fossil sharks and their evolution, and then also where their modern, or not modern, but like where their fossils can be discovered in modern places. So we already read through a couple streams ago in the last fossil special some of the Paleozoic sharks. So I think we could probably start with the Mesozoic. So for some context, the Mesozoic is the period that begins right after the Permian extinction. This was the largest extinction the world has ever seen. It's been a devastating event. Oops. Actually, probably we could start out reading. I'm going to squish this to make this a little bit more legible. We're going to start out reading more about the Permian extinction, just as a recap before we dive back into the Mesozoic. So, during the Permian, some of the most specialized shark genera became extinct. Sharks were still diverse, just not as diverse as in the Carboniferous. However, this all came to an abrupt end at the end of the Permian. The Permian is marked by the Big One, Earth's largest mass extinction ever. The extinction was so large as used to mark the end of the entire Paleozoic era. Life on Earth looked fundamentally different after this extinction. The common animals that existed for hundreds of millions of years vanished. After the Paleozoic era, there were no trilobites, eurypterids, horned corals, graptolites, or spiny sharks, a cross between a shark and a bony fish, which is kind of wild. I forgot that spiny sharks were that branch that were kind of in the middle between I guess not in the middle, but like an offshoot, somewhere lying between true chondrichthyans and then the bony fish, the Actinopterygii. So it's pretty cool to imagine that there was something that was kind of like somewhat intermediate, looking between those two forms. So the list goes on and on. Any surviving life was severely reduced as 80 to 95% of all species became extinct. Causes of extinction are linked to an abrupt climate change. The specific causes are still being debated. Whether it was a formation of Pangea, extreme volcanism, other geologic activities, an asteroid, or any combination thereof does not change the fact that almost all life on Earth was wiped out. Life barely squeaked by this one. Sharks barely survived this extinction event. One of the better known sharks from the Permian is Orthocanthus, a large freshwater eel-like shark. A complete specimen from Germany is shown above. So we saw this a couple streams ago, but this is Orthocanthus. So freshwater shark, I think we could pull up some modern depictions of it. There you go. So that's actually a really cool modern image of this species. There we go. So Orthocanthus, which has an extremely long fin spine right behind the head. Multi-lobes. So we have the pectoral fins, pelvic fins, and it looks like either a second set of paired fins or an anal fin, or I guess two anal fins. And it has multiple gill slits, so almost shaped like frilled sharks. The mouth is almost like the modern frill shark too, so very interesting looking animal. So that brings us to the Mesozoic, so this is where the Jurassic period is, and this is also where we get the beginning of the modern sharks. So 252 million years ago. The first period in the Mesozoic era, the Triassic period, 252, is an interesting time period as life on Earth began a slow recovery from the Permian mass extinction. The few surviving taxa, both on land and sea, radiated and diversified, creating new ecosystems. Although mammals made their appearance, reptiles were the main creatures to dominate these new ecosystems. They dominated the land via dinosaurs, they dominated the air via flying reptiles, they also dominated the sea with the new terrifying kind of animal, the great marine reptiles. These sea monsters were fierce predators that ruled the Mesozoic oceans. The surviving sharks took a back seat to these terrifying beasts. So it's really cool. We did talk about this in the last fossil stream, that Mesozoic reptiles like Mosasaurus, which is made famous by the Jurassic World movies, they were roaming the oceans, and they were the apex predator and probably outcompeted sharks for the period of time that they existed. Were the dominant predator, so you didn't really have the extremely large sharks that we saw later, because there was a different kind of apex predator at top of the food chain. Although sharks took a backseat to the great marine reptiles, they continued to diversify and took on their modern-looking characteristics. By the end of the Jurassic period in the Mesozoic, all 8 extant shark orders appeared. At the close of the Mesozoic era, at the end of the Cretaceous period 66 million years ago, a great mass extinction even took out most of the reptiles. An extinction event took out most of the reptiles. The dinosaurs, flying reptiles, and great marine reptiles all disappeared. This allowed sharks to once again become the top predators. So, a really awesome mix of Cretaceous sharks' teeth, which their ancestors were rooted in the Jurassic period. So, and it's incredible to see that these teeth don't really look that different from today's sharks. I mean that looks. I mean these two thin teeth look a lot like modern mako shark or sand tiger shark teeth. This one on the left is Scapanorhynchus, which is a goblet shark. This one on the bottom right is Cretolamna, which is a kind of mackerel shark. We have Squalocorax, Tychodus, and who else is here? Oh, here we go. Sorry. All were found, I was just reading, there was a description on the bottom. All these fossils were found at Big Brook, New Jersey, except for Tychodus, which is found in Sherman, Texas. Larger tooth measures 4.5 centimeters in height. Cenozoic is the rise of the giant shark. So this is after the Jurassic period, so we won't spend too much time here, but the famous megatooth sharks like Megalodon appeared in this period. So it's kind of cool to see that the Jurassic period came after an era of the mass extinction in the Permian, and then but also before an era where sharks could really dominate. It was this like the Jurassic period was a time when sharks were second to the giant marine reptiles, so they probably attained moderate sizes. It was really cool to see that they diversified into different niches, but they wouldn't become the dominant predators in the ocean until later. So we have a couple of cool shark species that we'll go into in more detail. And I want to save that for if we get more people, because I know Howard would love to see the Jurassic Sharks in particular. So, actually, we do have a couple more people, so I think maybe we could dive in. We'll start out with this is a nice little summary by the Australia Museum. So it's kind of like similarly giving a timeline of shark evolution, but we'll dive into diversity, I think, after this article. So, the ancient ones. So, sharks are ancient creatures that evolved long before dinosaurs lived on land. They survived 5 global mass extinctions, each of which wiped out more than 75% of animal species. So I won't read everything until we get to the Jurassic, but let's see. It wasn't until the Jurassic and the Cretaceous that sharks started to look more like the sharks that we see today. At the end of the Cretaceous, an extinction event caused by an asteroid impact wiped out about 75% of all species. So this was kind of like a little clip, and I'll put this link in the chat because Australian Museum does a lot of really good work. So if anybody in the future wants to take a look at it. It's kind of interesting quote from Professor John Long of the Flinders University in Adelaide. So, fishes are the basic body plan. It was simply the changing proportions of that body plan that led to the evolution of reptiles and mammals and eventually to us humans. This is a really beautiful mural, by the way, of a lot of sharks and other chondrichthyans and other animals from the ancient seas, and it looks like from left to right it's actually going forward in time. So you have some of the jawless fishes here. Eventually you come into the era of jaws where you have Dunkleosteus is I think the right way to pronounce it, but this terrifying fish, which I think is one of the placoderms. We have Cladosalaki down here. We have the whorl-tooth shark. I can't remember what that is, and I really should know because that's like a really famous fossil. Hybodonts. So we have Hybotus down here near an ichthyosaur. A lot of weird forms now that we're entering. There's Dimetrodon into the Mesozoic era. Lazosaurus right here. This is the Cretaceous era because of T-Rex. So it's kind of cool to see that the sharks at the far right of this mural, they're in the Jurassic period and the Cretaceous period. They're in the end of the Mesozoic era, but they actually look pretty similar to the sharks that we see today, whereas the sharks in the Paleozoic era before look a little bit more radically different, a little bit weirder. These are Orthocanthus or those freshwater sharks that are kind of more eel-like back here. So it's pretty cool. So just as a recap for shark evolution, the first jawless fish, called agnathans, are a common ancestor. They're still around today in the form of lampreys and hagfishes. Fossil agnathans date back to about 518 million years, a time when almost all life lived in the oceans. Agnathans later evolved into bony fish, amphibians, dinosaurs, and even birds. So nice evolutionary tree where you could see all the branches forming modern life. So you have agnathans eventually splitting off into the cartilaginous fishes, which includes sharks and rays and chimeras. Further down, you have the bony fishes splitting off from there, amphibians splitting off. This is actually, I really like how this tree is laid out because you can see that reptiles split off into these two major branches. So you have the common ancestor of reptiles here. There was a branch of reptiles that, I forget what Dimetrodon is called. Actually, let's pull that up. But reptiles like Dimetrodon are actually more closely related to mammals than they are to like the dinosaurs. So it's funny because like Dimetrodon is such a popular animal, and it is in like I think it was in the latest Jurassic, no, not the latest, but the Jurassic World movie where you had the original cast in it. Dimetrodon was there, but it's actually kind of like a weird creature that has a lot of mammalian characteristics. So let me pull up this group. What is this group? Synapses? I think it's synapsids. Synapsids. So, okay. Gotcha. So synapses, yeah. So that's what it was. So synapsids are the group of reptiles that eventually, like, you know, even some of them in the Mesozoic era, they started to kind of like develop like hair-like structures, like fuzz. Like they're still reptiles, but they eventually became the mammals that we know today. So, and this is where you can see like these branches like the whales and primates. So the other group of reptiles diversified into some of the ancient forms like crocodiles and turtles, and then the dinosaurs. So the two major groups of dinosaurs are the Ornithischians, and then I want to say it's Saurischians. So like a lot of the it's something to do with their hip bones. I forget how you classify dinosaurs. I know there's that two major groups, but anyway. And then one of the groups of dinosaurs hypermodified into birds. So birds are technically a kind of extremely modified dinosaur, kind of like humans and dogs and whatever. They're like highly modified synapsids. So it's really cool to see how the tree kind of fits together. So I actually really like this graph where it's simple enough to kind of see the major jumps through life and through time, but also complex enough where you can kind of see, or complete enough where you can kind of see the full picture as far as the vertebrates. So. Early shark ancestors. Some of the sharks cruising the world's oceans more than 300 million years ago looked somewhat like sharks as we know them. Others were very strange indeed. So we've got Acmonistion on the right, and then Falcatus on the left. So, sorry, I'm trying to... So Acmonistion, I think these are called the anvil sharks because they have this really weird feature kind of above the gills, behind the head, that it looks like an anvil with highly modified dermal denticles on the top of it. So very, very strange feature here. Falcatus is an ancient sexually dimorphic shark, where you have the males having this weird spine, kind of in a similar position as the anvil sharks. And the females not having that. So kind of like modern chimeras. I think we touched on this group the last fossil stream that we did. Modern chimeras have this too, but like the males will have this kind of strange feature, in a place you don't really expect, and it's something to do with mating. So it's pretty interesting. We'll kind of like breeze through these sharks because they are a little bit older than the Jurassic. So. We will take some time to read about shark fossils. So, one of the problems for paleontologists studying ancient sharks is that they don't have much to go on. Because shark skeletons are made of cartilage, they don't fossilize well. Luckily, the hard tooth-like scales that cover a shark's body, called denticles, do. What we know about early sharks comes from the tiny denticles found in rocks. The oldest are about 450 million years old. So this is really cool graph about how sharks' teeth fossilize. So sharks going after a prey item, they lose and shed a bunch of teeth throughout the year. This is why, or throughout their lives. This is why shark fossils are so common. When you think about all the amounts of fossils that you can find in the world, sharks' teeth are actually some of the more common. And it's because like sharks shed their teeth continuously. So imagine like billions of sharks over billions of or millions of years, just shedding teeth. There's a high probability that you'll find some. And I personally have maybe over 100 shark teeth, and this is just from the coastal Virginia region. So it's collected over 5 years, or not 5 years, no, 10 years, probably 10 years. But still, it's kind of amazing like how many how many sharks' teeth there are in the world, and how much has been deposited, just given how many how many teeth an individual shark sheds in its lifetime. But anyway, so the teeth fall out, and they are white. They're made out of keratin, and they're this like pearly white color. And then as they get buried in sediment and mineralize, they take on characteristics of whatever the surrounding rock is, and they too become a kind of rock. So all fossils are actually technically a kind of rock of sorts, where it's organic material kind of borrowing material from surrounding rock and sediment. So sharks' teeth take on a variety of colors as they fossilize. So typically it's a black color, like a black or a dark gray, but it depends on the material in which it is found. So there's sharks' teeth that are this cool like sandy color. There's sharks' teeth that are kind of like this cool like blue color. But typically the transition usually is from white teeth to black teeth. And what's extremely exciting is that there's some cultures, and particularly in North America, like ancient North America, well, not ancient, but like pre-colonial North America, there are cultures that traded in shark teeth and saw the transition, or saw the difference between the white teeth and the black teeth. and incorporated it into like shamanic rituals where the transition from white teeth to black teeth represented the transition from life to death. And it's part of why some cultures bury shark teeth, like fossilized shark teeth, with people, especially people who may have been more spiritual leaders in those tribes, because they represent the passage from this world to the netherworld, or the other world. Or the passage from life into death, which is really, really cool. So it's amazing that there's a human connection with fossilization of shark teeth as well. So, how does a shark tooth become a fossil? Sediment buries a tooth over a long time, and over time a thick bed of sedimentary rock accumulates. Gradually the tooth turns into stone as replaced by other minerals which leach in from the surrounding sedimentary rocks. The rock with the fossil tooth is exposed by weathering and erosion and dug out of the ground by paleontologists or just shark fossil hunters. This is an incredible array of teeth, beautifully preserved. So unbelievable to see that this is an entire jaw set. You can even see the caudal vertebrae, or not caudal vertebrae, sorry, the vertebrae behind the chondrocranium. So this is a 5 million year old fossil from an ancient white shark. This is Carcharodon hubbli. So this is not the great white, but this is a larger ancestor of the great white, which is so cool to see. So very similar looking teeth to the great white shark, but and just amazing how this individual preserved. For hundreds of millions of years, sharks have been adapting to changes in oceans and rivers, dramatic cycles of oceans cooling and warming, different types of prey becoming extinct, algal blooms, acidic oceans, competition with other large predators. Sharks have been through it all and survived. So I kind of like that this is like a little homage to the prehistoric marine reptiles. So these are the things that haunted the Jurassic period and really were at the top of the food chain and really were no joke and predated on sharks. So, but after the Jurassic period, after the Cretaceous period, after the Cretaceous extinction, a niche opened up so you can have larger sharks surviving. So here we go. This is Megalodon, the largest fish that ever lived. Megalodon, Otodus megalodon, sometimes known as Carcocles megalodon, swam in our oceans between about 20 million and 3.6 million years ago. It evolved from a now extinct group known as the megatooth sharks, Otodontidae. Luckily for us, it became extinct long before humans evolved. Scientists think Megalodon grew up to 20 meters long. That's more than 3 times longer than the largest white shark. Even though they look like white sharks, Megalodon's closest living relative is the short-fin mako shark, which is pretty cool to see. So Megalodons and mako sharks, they both had a common ancestor that split off, where the mako sharks became these like fast, streamlined sharks. The Megalodons became these extremely huge, chonky, whale-eating sharks. What's kind of cool is that, I've mentioned this many times, but mako sharks, some of them split again and branched off to become a little bit bigger, a little bit fatter, specializing in seals, and those became the great white sharks. So white sharks are like a hyper-modified mako shark, and they're not really that closely related to Megalodon. So people like, actually, unfortunately, I would say some scientists, like some authors of like shark books, mistakenly equate Megalodon as an ancestor of white shark, and that's not true. Megalodon branched off a while ago, and really an ancient mako shark is the ancestor of a white shark. So let's see. We'll kind of skip the rest of Megalodon stuff because that's not really a Jurassic shark. So. This is kind of cool. Gold sharks, like all living creatures, sharks are part of the ecosystems in which they live and shaped time by what's happening in their environment. About 300 million years ago, extinction killed many types of fish, gave sharks the chance to diversify and rule the oceans. This period is called the Golden Age of Sharks. A whole variety of different species appeared, including Macmonastion and various species of Philocoprion and Bronchatus. So this is still pretty far before the Jurassic period. The weird sharks that we saw, like the anvil shark or Falcatus, that's from this period. So, let's see. Early sharks looked very different than the ones around today. You have some of these freshwater sharks. So these are xenocanth sharks with very large spines behind their heads. Um, Very anguilliform looking bodies, so eel-like bodies, and freshwater. So right now it's extremely rare to find a freshwater shark. So we only have the river sharks, the genus Glyphis. There's only about 5 species of those, versus 540 marine sharks. There's only 5 freshwater sharks, and the bull shark, which is not really, it's not a true freshwater shark because it doesn't complete its life history in freshwater. It's a shark that enters freshwater occasionally, and then also goes back out to sea. So you only have bull sharks and the Glyphis sharks, the river sharks, and that's it. But back in the day, we had freshwater sharks as a pretty biodiverse and viable niche, which is so cool to see. Xenocanth sharks live in freshwater, estuarine, and coastal marine environments between 350 and 200 million years ago. So that actually technically dips into the Jurassic period. So these guys kind of went extinct right before the Jurassic period, but there was somewhat of a presence here. So dispersed throughout the world, they survived extreme climatic conditions with seasonal changes to river levels. Today, their fossils are found in Australia, Brazil, India, Oman, USA, United Kingdom, and Germany. So it's kind of funny that really didn't go into a lot of Jurassic Shark details. So I think we should check out this article from Dive magazine without ads. So because it is focusing exclusively on Jurassic Sharks. So I think this will be a lot of fun to see and to take a look at the biodiversity. So here we go. These are Jurassic Sharks, Helicoprion. That's what it's called. So I've been trying to remember what this animal is called because this is a really famous shark fossil, Helicoprion, the whirl-tooth shark. This one I think is Adestus. This is the scissor-tooth shark, so a really freaky looking animal. This one I'm not 100% sure what this one is. It almost looks like an ancient Otodus, but I think Otodus came later. So this is some giant looking. It almost looks like something like an ancestor of the group of sharks that became the Makos and the Megalodons, but I'm not 100% sure what this is. So let's check it out. Let's see. The time was 300 million years ago. Sharks dominated the oceans in a period of ecological decadence. There was an explosion of bizarre life forms living in the seas, which rocked the evolutionary ladder. Sharks with curved, pointed spikes projecting from their skulls, tooth-covered spines, wing-like pectoral fins for gliding through the air, and others encased in armor plating. The truth about Jurassic sharks can be really stranger than fiction. I like how they kind of give these weird modern names to these sharks, so we'll take a look. Razorhead. Wow. So really amazing image here. I've never heard of the term razorhead for a shark, but look at this thing chomping on. It looks like a plesiosaur. It's kind of wild. Cretooxyrhina mantelli, sometimes known as the Ginsu mako, plied the seas of the late Cretaceous period 85 to 83 million years ago. Their remains have been recovered from marine sediments in Africa and Europe, but most famously from those of the Cretaceous Inland Seaway, a shallow ocean that ran north to south down the length of North America. This cut the continent in two during much of the Cretaceous period. Cretooxyrhina's remains indicate it was a distant relation to the mackerel sharks, the great white mako and porbeagle. Skeleton shows it was similar in appearance to the mako. It is especially true of the shark's teeth, which were elongated triangles, unserrated by razor sharp, much like a mako shark's. Cretooxyrhina's prey remains a matter of conjecture, but there's plenty of evidence to show that it ate large marine reptiles which it shared the Cretaceous oceans with. Numerous fossilized bones of mosasaurs, sea-going lizards related to monitor lizards, have been found scoured with with shark teeth marks, even savagely severed by violent twisting motion of larger feeding sharks. So it's amazing that these sharks actually did go after mosasaurs. So it's not just necessarily mosasaurus; it could be like a smaller kind of mosasaur, but really wild to see. Let's see. Cretooxy. Oh, I'm sorry, I already read that. The real smoking gun has been the Cretooxyrhina's teeth found embedded in the mosasaur bones. Of course, it is unknown whether the reptiles have been killed or were being scavenged by these sharks, but Cretoxyrhina grew to 6 meters in length, so it's not out of the question that it could quite easily have taken some of the smaller mosasaurs. Cretoxyrhina became extinct approximately 83 million years ago, apparently succumbing to the rise of various giant predatory marine reptiles. Lizard tail. So these are actually somewhat familiar. I think this is probably the same group of sharks that we were seeing before, but really cool art, by the way. Oh, it is. Xenocanthus and Orthocanthus are both xenocanths, a group of long-bodied sharks that dominated freshwater environments between 220 million years ago, although they also lived in brackish and marine waters. Other large groups of sharks also invaded freshwater environments, but none were as successful as the xenocanths. Most xenocanths were small, less than a meter long, but Orthocanthus was a giant reaching 3 meters. So that's about 15 feet, actually probably closer to 16 feet. No, I'm sorry, no, I can't do math. 10 feet, sorry, that's 10 feet. Maybe even 11 feet. Hold on. Meters to feet. 1 second. 3 times 3.3. 10 feet. That's 10 feet. So, didn't know what I was talking about for a hot second. A peculiar feature of many xenocanths is a long spine that projects backwards from the top of the head. This structure has no clear function and does not seem to have been mobile. Xenocanths also have peculiar twin-pronged teeth and a double anal fin. Unlike more familiar sharks, Xenocanthus had a narrow, tapering, symmetrical tail and a long, low dorsal fin. More primitive members of the Xenocanth group, however, had triangular dorsal fins and tails like those of modern sharks, so these features in Xenocanthus were advanced rather than primitive. It is conceivable that Xenocanths modified these features to enable easier movement through underwater clutter, as the freshwater habitats in which the sharks are preserved sometimes seem to have been weed-choked and strewn with dead leaves and broken branches. That's actually really cool. Hold on, let me review that. So they have this long spine. Let's see. Easier movement through underwater clutter. It makes sense. So that's actually really cool that the spine kind of like might be this weird feature that helps the shark kind of like get through some like kind of cut through some weedy habitat. Because if it didn't have the spine, maybe it would have been tangled in some densely vegetated habitat potentially. That's a cool theory, honestly. Features in the skull and fin show that Xenocanths were part of a group that was ancestral to all modern sharks. Tooth Slayer, so these are really funny names, but I kind of love that. So that's that original image. Okay, so top left is Tooth Slayer, which this is Helicoprion. The top right is Scissorjaw, which is Edestus, and then the bottom is Megatooth, which I'm not sure who that is, like what kind of shark that is. So, Helicoprion, or the Tooth Slayer, is an absurd-looking shark from the Permian Age, best known for its spiraling whorl of teeth. Such whorls were characteristic of the Edestids, primitive sharks that may have been the dominant marine predators in the oceans of 260 million years ago. Like all sharks, Helicoprion was constantly growing new teeth. However, rather than the shedding its worn teeth, it retained them and was thus always adding new ones to what must have been a slowly rotating circular conveyor belt of teeth. The older teeth near the center of the whorl were grown by the shark when it was younger and therefore smaller, and consequently the teeth became smaller towards the center of the whorl. Early researchers were baffled by this whorl and wondered if it might have sprouted from the dorsal fin, tail, or upper jaw. Only recently have scientists come to understand the true life appearance of whorl-toothed sharks. Scissorjaw is the actual Edestus. So Edestus is another Edestid, but one with huge protruding triangular teeth in both its upper and lower jaws. These form two beak-like structures that could have cut against one another like scissor blades, and presumably this is how Edestus dispatched its prey. While Edestids were known primarily for their bizarre arrays of teeth, little is known about their bodies. Unlike most modern sharks, experts believe that these sharks did not have gills, but whether or not they had dorsal fins remained uncertain. It's really weird That's actually extremely strange. I doubt that they didn't have gills, and I don't know what would lead to them thinking that, but because how would the animal breathe? So it's really, really kind of like a strange theory, but incomplete skulls show that the Odestid had huge eyes, so they hunted in deep or murky waters. New evidence suggests that Odestids had elongated eel-like bodies. In this case, giants such as Odestus could have reached lengths of about 30 meters. Megatooth. So this is a little confusing. These three sharks in this illustration, they actually didn't really coexist. These two are more ancient. I didn't realize that this was actually Megalodon. So, and this is a lot more recent. This is Cenozoic, where these are both like Paleozoic sharks. So, we don't need to really read about the Meg. Blah 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 blah. Recent estimates suggest a more reasonable but not unsubstantial 10 to 20 meters in length, which is still humongous. Megalodon teeth reach a maximum base to tip length of 17 centimeters. Whale bones found in association with megalodon fossils bear scars and bite marks clearly inflicted by this giant predator. It appears that Megalodon was a specialized whale killer that used immense crushing power in its stout, powerful teeth to immobilize large prey. A reduction in whale species diversity around 2 million years ago, together with climate change, may have been responsible for the extinction of this shark. Controversy continues over what kind of shark Megalodon was. Some argue it was a close relative of the living great white and should be placed in the same genus. If this is correct, Megalodon would have looked much like a gigantic great white, but with a blunter, deeper head. Others contend it was a member of the group that includes nurse and sand tiger sharks. In this case, it would have had a less spindle-shaped body, less erect tail, and a lower dorsal fin than the great white. So that's actually really cool. I never even thought that the Megalodon's body plan is kind of up for debate. We don't know if it actually really looked like a modern mackerel shark or if it looked a little bit more like elongate, which is pretty interesting to think about, actually. So we know that most of the research is kind of pointing that it's its own thing. It's not really a great white shark relative, because great whites are modified mako sharks. So I kind of err on the side that the Megalodon probably looked more like a sand tiger shark or a nurse shark, which is so cool. But I don't know. Spine tooth. So this is the weird. I think this is Anachmastodon, but let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, Stethocanthus. So I always get Xenocanthus and Stethocanthus confused. Stethocanthus was not unlike many modern sharks in body shape. However, remarkably, it sported an expanded, tooth-covered spine growing upwards and backwards from its shoulder region, just in front of its modified first dorsal fin. A patch of spiky teeth also grew from the top of its head. Several suggestions have been made to explain these bizarre structures. One is perhaps that when viewed from above, and with Stethocanthus flexing its body up and down, they mimicked a huge pair of jaws opening and closing, and thus function as a threat display. Alternatively, the male Stethocanthus may have used these spiky structures to grip the female's body during mating. In fact, it may be that only males had the toothy spine. Known from fossils in both Scotland and Montana, Stethocanthus was around 1 meter in length. So, really kind of wild looking animal. And the idea that the shark's head and dorsal fin could clamp together into this weird jaw structure, I don't think that's what's going on, but it's a really cool idea. I think it's more related to mating, probably. But the lump. So, who is this? It's really cool to see that ancient sharks, by the way, were not only these awesome predators, but they had these kind of more delicate forms too, because we saw on the last fossil special the flying sharks. So they're kind of like flying fish, except they're sharks. And similarly, it looks like we've got a shark right here that looks almost like a frogfish, but it actually is a kind of shark of some kind. So, Balantia represents the Petalodonts, a group that could win the prize for the most unusual group of sharks ever. Known since the 1840s for their distinctive teeth, not until 1989 was their compact, lumpy body shape revealed for the first time. Vaguely reminiscent of that seen in frogfish, perhaps Balantia was a bottom dweller that could clamber over rocks and shells using its stout, fleshy fins. So, this might have been one of the original sort of cute sharks. This illustration makes them look a little freaky looking, but The idea of this little shark walking along the seabed, a lot like the modern epaulet sharks do, is, it's a bit endearing. The teeth of Blantia were stout with triangular serrated crowns. Perhaps they were used for rasping at coral or breaking into mollusk shells, a diet supported by the presence of armor plates around the mouth. So that's kind of similar to parrotfish. These could have served to protect the face from abrasive foodstuffs. The tail Blantia was tiny, suggesting that when it swam, it did so by oscillating its dorsal and pelvic fins, much like modern wrasse and parrotfish. Like other sharks, Blantia was covered in tiny tentacles that grew from its skin. Spiny tail. So there's this little guy right here, which is kind of incredible looking. It's an amazing looking animal because it looks like this weird mix of like a sea robin and like a chub. It's so interesting. Like, and as chub as in the fish, there's a fish called a chub, and it just looks like that a little bit. So, a chimera was a highly decorated chimera, less than 10 centimeters long, known from the 325-million-year-old rocks of Bear Gulch in Montana, USA, the same locality that has yielded Stethecanthus, Blantia, and many other fossil sharks. Chimeras, sometimes called ratfish or rabbitfish, are not sharks but they're close relatives. Virtually all chimeras, including Echinochimera, have flattened crushing plates in their mouths which they use to dismember mollusks and crustaceans. They have wing-like pectoral fins and elongated tails, often with a whip-like tip. Male and female specimens of Echinochimera are known. As with some living chimeras, males had spikes on the head, as well as rod-like claspers beneath the tail. Both sets of structures would have been used to grip the female during mating. Males had also had a row of spikes running along the tip of the tail. The spiky profile of this little animal provided the inspiration for its name. Echinochimera means spiny chimera. The winged warriors. So this is actually really cool. These are the flying sharks, which is so wild to see in this illustration. But and some of this looks so dramatic that artistic liberties probably were taken in this, but still, it is really cool to see. Just like the diversity. I mean, just the fact that it's actually like flying sharks. It's just it's like similar to the niche of flying fish. It's just so cool. So here we go. It almost looks like dragons from what was that series? Like the How to Train Your Dragon series. It's just really fun to see. Promexili, Iniopteryx, and Inioptera represent the Iniopterygians, a bizarre group of small open water sharks that have massive wing-like pectoral fins, large blunt heads, and rounded tail fins. The huge pectoral fins of Iniopterygians had hooked spines along their leading edges, the function of which are a mystery, and are attached to the body very high up on its side. This and other features indicate that the fins of these sharks could be flapped up and down, and that Iniopterygians therefore flew underwater like modern-day penguins and turtles. Today, chimeras, the closest relatives of Iniopterygians, have much smaller fins, but they too swam in this way. Oh, actually, interesting. Let's take a look at a modern chimera, because I think it would be good to kind of compare. Rabbitfish. Let's see. No, that's not a chimera. Let's do a ratfish. So, or we'll just do ratfish, ghost shark. So modern chimeras have a lot of, okay, yeah, maybe that. Modern chimeras have a lot of fun names. Let's do this one. This one looks pretty good. We don't need an ad. Oh. We really don't need an ad at all. Okay. There we go. So this is actually a great view of how chimeras move, and it's kind of cool to compare this with the Iniopterygians, so the ancient Jurassic flying sharks, where you can kind of see how well that this chimera can articulate its pectoral fins and how large they are. And to compare that with the flying sharks, it's kind of cool. So chimeras are not bony fish, even though they kind of look like them. You can actually see some of the features that make them closer looking to sharks and rays than other animals. They have cartilaginous bodies, and you can kind of see that in the way that their fins billow. And it's actually really cool that it's swimming up to the camera. How flexible they look as well. You can actually clearly see claspers on this individual, which is pretty cool. So that's a classic feature of the cartilaginous fishes. And you actually see a dorsal fin spine too. But really, cartilaginous fishes, they all have, like, whether it's a shark or a ray or a chimera, they all have this kind of like this graceful look. And I think it's just because of their bodies where, they're more flexible. They have cartilage as opposed to bone. So the bone is a little bit more of a rigid structure, whereas cartilage is a lot more fluid. And I feel like there's kind of more of a elegance to the way they move versus the bony fishes. And the bony fish are beautiful, but there's an undescribable quality of sharks and rays and chimeras that you can kind of see how they all relate to one another. Just even by eyeballing it, you can kind of see some of the detail or some of the similarities in how they move. Great clip of this. So it's kind of cool to see a modern modern chimera be a model for what an ancient Jurassic relative may have looked like. So we'll hop back to that. In contrast to chimeras, the enormous fins of the Iniopterygians are similar to those of flying fish. Perhaps, therefore, Iniopterygians also use their fins in gliding through the air, a defensive tactic evolved to evade pursuing aquatic predators. Okay, the sword bearer. So this article is fantastic. I will post this in a chat for future viewers too, because it's a really great summary of ancient sharks. It's not quite limited to the Jurassic period, but there's still quite a variety of sharks that they're kind of poking in and out of the period. So either way, it's really cool to see ancient shark biodiversity. So Damocles, a close relative of Stephacanthus, is named after the character from a Greek mythology above whose head a sword was suspended. In Damocles, the sword was a curving, forward-pointing spike that projected from the back of the skull, thought perhaps to have been a sexual organ. As with many modern sharks, the males had longer, slimmer teeth than the females. Female specimens of Damocles only been discovered very recently, and they lack both the sword and the long, slim teeth. Male specimens of Damocles had clusters of enlarged skin teeth, or the denticles, on their spike on the top of their head. Further clusters were located on the sides of the head and in front part of the body. Damocles had huge eyes and a tail with triangular, symmetrical upper and lower lobes. These features suggest that it was a pursuit predator that hunted other fish by sight. So I think that's the end of this article, this collection. But it's really cool to see this diversity here. So raised in Arizona, to see the sharks that roamed in the Bear Gulch and those of the Carboniferous and Permian ages, you would have dived in the Tethys Ocean, a huge sea that surrounded the supercontinent Pangaea. Xenocanthus and Orthocanthus were from the rivers of the Chinle Formation, was now Arizona. Cretoxorhinus swam in the Sundance Sea that ran down the center of North America during the late Cretaceous period, the end of the age of the dinosaurs, about 75 million years ago. Crocodilus megalodon swam in what are essentially our modern oceans. So let's go back to Cretoxorhinus. Stephacanthus. Destus. Okay, so this shark right here is the one that is closest to existing in the Jurassic period. So, and again, the Jurassic period is when all the modern sharks emerged. So, everybody else is kind of a mix of periods. So these two again are ancient. The megalodon is Cenozoic. So Paleozoic, Paleozoic, Cenozoic, Mesozoic right here. So as a reference, Paleozoic is like the ancient seas before the Permian mass extinction. Mesozoic is like the dinosaur age, and then Cenozoic is like the modern age. So one more time, Paleozoic. So Helicoprion and Odestus are Paleozoic sharks. Megalodon is Cenozoic, so it's kind of a modern-ish shark. Cretoxyrhina is did I have that name? Yeah, Cretoxyrhina is Mesozoic, so this is a Jurassic shark, a true Jurassic shark. Paleozoic, these sharks are ancient animals, these Xenocanthus and Orthocanthus. Again, same image, so we'll skip it. Paleozoic for Cephalocanthus. I think these two are Paleozoic. Balantia. These, I actually do think the Edopterygians did exist in the Jurassic period. So I'm pretty sure the flying sharks were from that era, from the Mesozoic era. These I think are Paleozoic, and I think that was it. So, right, so a fantastic article here. Let's see. So I think what we'll do, because not a lot of activity tonight, which is totally cool. I think what we might do is I might end early and do a part 2 of Jurassic Sharks next week. But I do want to end, if so, with this really cool article on a shark that is exclusively from the Jurassic period and has a really cool rendering here. So there's a complete fossil that gave us a lot of context for what this shark looks like. And what's kind of fun is it looks like it has a lot of shared features between modern sharks today. So you have an elongated snout, kind of like the carpet sharks, even kind of like the cat sharks a little bit too, spherical right behind the eye. You have these dorsal fins on the far back of the body with spines, so that's kind of like the horn sharks. But the two dorsal fins that far back almost is reminiscent of angel sharks. And then you have these like large rounded pectoral fins. It's such a unique shape. So this shark is called Protospinax annectens. And there's also a Jurassic ray here, so that's Astrodomus platypurus. But here we go. So this article is called Jurassic Shark, Sharks in the Jurassic Period was already highly evolved. Cartilaginous fishes have changed much more in the course of their evolutionary history than previously believed. Evidence for the species have been provided by a new fossil of a ray-like shark, Protospinax annectens, which demonstrate that sharks were already highly evolved in the late Jurassic. This is a result of a recent study by an international research group led by paleobiologist Patrick Jambura from the Department of Paleontology at the University of Vienna, which was recently published in the journal Diversity. Let's see, so we will just kind of skim through this. Protospinax carried features that are found in both sharks and rays today. They lived 150 million years ago and was 1.5 meters long, dorsoventrally flattened cartilaginous fish with expanded pectoral fins and a prominent fin spine in front of each dorsal fin. Although known from well-preserved fossils, a phylogenetic position of Protospinax had puzzled researchers ever since it was first described in 1918. Of particular interest is whether Protospinax represents a transition between sharks and rays as a missing link. A hypothesis has gained considerable appeal among experts over the past 25 years. Alternatively, Protospinax could have been a very primitive shark, an ancestor of rays and sharks, or an ancestor of a certain group of sharks, the Galeomorphi, which includes the great white shark today, all of which are exciting ideas whose plausibility have now been clarified by scientists. Let's see. Incorporating the latest fossil finds, Jambura and his international team reconstructed the family tree of the extant sharks and rays using genetic data and embedded fossil groups, including Protospinax. The results of the analysis were startling. Protospinax was neither a missing link nor a ray nor a primitive shark, but a highly evolved shark. Huh. Let's see. We tend to think of evolution like a hierarchical ladder-like system in which older groups are at the base, while humans, as a very young species in Earth history, are at the top. In truth, however, evolution has never stopped, even for these primitive representatives, but they continue to evolve day by day via changes in their DNA, just as we do. This is the only way they have been able to adapt to constantly changing environments and survive to this day. Let's see. Modern species disappeared. Okay, even though cartilaginous fishes as a group have survived to this day, most species disappeared during its evolution, including Protospinax. Why Protospinax became extinct at the Jurassic Cretaceous boundary some 145 million years ago, and why there is no comparable shark species today, while the ecologically similarly adapted rays exist relatively unchanged this day, remains a mystery at this point. Interesting. So let's see if we can get some more images. So here's the actual complete fossil of Protospinax, which is so cool. So it almost looks like a guitar fish, but the key thing that makes it a shark is that the gills are on the side of the head, and the pectoral fins are not fused to the head. So this is definitely a shark of some kind. But it does look so strange, and I love the idea that it's an ancestor of galeomorphs, because if I'm not mistaken, I think heterodontiforms are galeomorphs too. So it kind of has the traits of a bullhead shark, but it also has traits of the modern-looking carpet sharks and cat sharks. So pretty interesting. Out of curiosity, I might take a look at this article if I can. Hope I don't crash the bandwidth, because I want to see the evolutionary. Oh, that's just an image. Let's see if we can get to the article. That'd be really cool to read, and if we can't, that's okay. It probably looks like we. Oh, here we go. Okay, let's see. Okay, the late Jurassic, so this is called Systematics and Phylogenetic Interrelationships of the Enigmatic Late Jurassic Shark Protospinax annectens, Woodward 1918, with comments on the shark race sister group relationship. So this is actually a really cool article. The late Jurassic Melazarbrink Protospinax annectens is often regarded as a key species to our understanding of crown group Melazarbrink interrelationships and the evolutionary history of this group. However, since its first description more than 100 years ago, its phylogenetic position within the Melazarbranchii, sharks and rays, has proven controversial, and a closer relationship between Protospinax and each of the positioned superorders, Batomorphi, Squalomorphi, and Galeomorphii. Batomorphii, Squalomorphii, and Galeomorphii. So this is all of the rays, a branch of sharks that are kind of typically called like the ancient sharks. These are like the dogfish and frilled sharks and angel sharks, and the galeomorphs, which are like the typically called the modern sharks. It's not a good not a good term for it, but anyway. Proposed over time. Here we revise a controversial taxon based on new holomorphic specimens from the late Jurassic Conservat Lagerstate of the Solnhofen archipelago in Bavaria, Germany, and review its skeletal morphology, systematics, and phylogenetic interrelationships. Data matrix of 224 morphological characters was compiled and analyzed under a molecular backbone constraint. Our results indicate a close relationship between Protospinax, angel sharks, and saw sharks. Wow. I was not expecting that. So that's not galeomorphy, that's squalomorphy. So that's really interesting. However, the revision of our morphological data matrix within a molecular framework highlights the lack of morphological characters defining certain groups, especially sharks of the order Squaliforms, hampering the phylogenetic resolution of Protospinax annectens with certainty. Furthermore, the monophyly of modern sharks retrieved by molecular studies is only weakly supported by morphological data, stressing the need for more characters to align morphological and molecular studies in the future. Okay, so when was this written? 2023. This is 2023. So this actually might have some really cool new information. I want to see oh, wow. So these are fossils of Protospinax, and they're all beautifully preserved. Which is so cool. I mean, it's incredible how complete these are for a cartilaginous fish. I do want to skip to, excuse me, the evolutionary tree or phylogenetic tree and kind of see where they got to. Because shark phylogenies always change, and I'm very curious to see if there's any updates to the relationships between sharks. So, this is a really interesting aspect right here. These are the dorsal fin spines. So these are ancient fossils, but you can actually see the fin spines on the shark's body. It's so cool. Let's see. Here we go. So they always do comparisons, don't they? So let's see. Synapomorphies are indicated by black points. Homoplasies are indicated by white points. Let's see. So there's two phylogenetic trees. This first one is a strict consensus tree. The second one is a majority rule consensus tree. So we'll compare and see what's going on here. From the morphological data under a conservative molecular backbone constraint with map characters. Okay. So this is saying that you've got chimeras, which are an outgroup of all sharks, hybodonts, which are also an outgroup of all modern sharks. You've got the squalomorphs. Okay, so you have this split between the sharks, which are red and blue, and then the rays, which are purple. So there was definitely a split between these groups a long time ago, and then within the modern sharks, there was another split between the galeomorphs and squalomorphs. So it's cool to see that in the squalomorphs, this is where you got Protospinax, which is so weird because there were so many ways in which I felt like it looked like a horn shark or a cat shark. So it's kind of interesting that it's not really those; it's actually part of the squalomorph group. So this is saying that it's a very ancient squalomorph. You've got hexantiforms right here. You've got the angel sharks, squatiniforms here, saw sharks here. Saw sharks and angel sharks are thought to be a monophyletic group, which is pretty interesting. And then you have all the squaliforms here. So dogfish, kitefin sharks, in here. Here you have the galeomorphs, so heterodontiforms, the bullhead sharks split off early from the rest, which kind of makes sense. The electrolobiforms, like the carpet sharks, the nurse shark, whale shark, split off from the remaining group. You have lambdiforms splitting off from carchariniforms, and then eventually you have the evolution of modern sharks, like the not the evolution of modern sharks, but the splits here are kind of leading up to you have Sirena, which are the hammerheads, Carcharinus, which are the requiem sharks, and Rhizoprionida, which are sharpnose sharks. So cool. Now let's see if the other tree had anything different. So that was the first one. The second one, let's see, saying hybodonts are outliers of sharks. There's a majority rule consensus tree from the morphological data. Let's see. So the rays branch off from the sharks. So the purple group, that is the rays, branch off from the sharks, which are in red and blue a long time ago. Galeomorphs and squalomorphs are still completely different. The position here changed a little bit, which is interesting. So this is saying that Protospinax is actually more closely related to angel sharks and saw sharks than the other groups, which is interesting. This is also saying that the squaliforms are more closely related to that group of sharks than the hexantiforms, so that the cow sharks and frill sharks really broke off a long time ago and became their own thing, which I think that makes sense. I think that makes more sense, honestly. The galeomorph cladogram or sorry, phylogenetic tree uh, remains pretty unchanged. You still have the bullhead sharks splitting off pretty early. Then you had the carpet sharks splitting away, and then you had the mackerel sharks doing their own thing, and then eventually you have how the carchariniforms evolved. But still, really cool to see how these relationships, or how these groups of sharks interrelate. So, I'm just gonna skip ahead to see if there's any other cool figures. Beautiful illustration of Protospinax, so ancient Jurassic shark that apparently is more closely related to modern angel sharks and saw sharks, which is pretty interesting. And I think that's it. So let's see. If I can zoom in on this image to get a better view. There we go. So there we go. Awesome. And actually, let's see a little bit of white. There we go. That is satisfactory. All right. So I think for tonight, this is really interesting. In the how long have I been doing this stream? I think I've been doing this for 3 years. This is a pretty quiet night, so I actually think I might end early, but it still is really cool to go through shark evolution. So I think this is probably going to be a two-parter. So I will talk about Jurassic Sharks again next week, because there's still a lot more material to review, and we didn't even look at the footage of the 3D models, like the renderings of what these sharks look like and how they may have moved. But I kind of want to save that for when we have some of our regulars back in the chat. So we'll try that for next week. But until then, for anybody who is currently watching or watching in the future, hope you enjoyed this tour, this part 1 of Jurassic Sharks. So we'll continue with part 2 next week and learn more about what makes these sharks really cool and unique. I mean, they're already self-evidently extremely cool and unique in terms of, these forms don't exist today. So it's cool to see like how sharks evolved, to kind of like take a peek into their story and their evolution, and how the modern sharks that we have, they weren't really always there. There was other forms in the past that had certain niches and certain roles that maybe don't exist anymore. So it's really cool to see how it all developed. So, but until then, for anyone watching now or in the future, I hope you have a great week. And I'm excited to talk about these sharks again for next week. And we'll kind of peel back more layers for shark evolutionary history and dive back into sharks of the Jurassic period. And I think, the broader conversation of shark evolution will still continue. But until then, take care and have a good night, and we'll see you next week.